In 2018, the board of the National Federation of Group Water Schemes decided it would be a good time and a good opportunity to develop a new strategic plan for the organisation. So the plan was developed in early 2019 and published later that year. I'm delighted to have the opportunity today to just give you an overview of the plan, what our strategic priorities are up to 2024, and what we hope to see as our intended outcomes during that period. So the plan itself was influenced by quite a number of things, not least our ongoing policies, strategies, and initiatives we're rolling out across the country, but also motions we receive from our members each year to our annual delegates conference. Also, the legislative obligations on the group water scheme sector, clearly in terms of drinking water quality compliance and also compliance with the Water Framework Directive, were also a major focus of this plan. And the EPA drinking water quality reports, as you've seen from other presentations, clearly highlight the gap that still exists between overall compliance on private supplies as opposed to public supplies. So we wanted to really address that in this plan. The Water Services Policy Statement was a document that was published by the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government in 2018. And that document really helped us set the context and structure of our plan, as you'll see as I take you down through it. The River Basin Management Plan, also as most of you are familiar with, sets out Ireland's objectives to meet the Water Framework Directive. And clearly source protection is a major part of that. So we wanted to make sure that both the River Basin Management Plan and our own plan were married in that regard, but also that our plan may influence the next cycle of the River Basin Management Plan as well. At present, there's a climate and biodiversity emergency in this country. So throughout the plan, we wanted to make sure that the group water scheme sector is doing their best to help the country address these challenges. So our mission statement, obviously as a representative organisation, our main focus is to make sure that we continue to provide effective representation for our members. We're also, our major part of the service that we deliver to schemes is our mentoring and advisory service through our development staff and our training programs. And this is key for us to make sure that group water schemes continue to build sustainable and resilient group schemes across the country that provide professional services to their members and that they meet their obligations in terms of source protection, water conservation, and most importantly, drinking water quality. So our vision, at the end of this plan, what do we want to see? Well, for us, one of the main priorities is we want to see group water schemes consistently complying with the drinking water regulations. We also want to see a sustainable, financially secure, reliable, and an efficient group water scheme sector. We want to see a sector that is more environmentally conscious of the difficulties that we're currently experiencing in rural Ireland and what they can do about it. And also a key part of our plan is the cooperative nature on which the group water scheme sector is built. These are community-owned, community-operated supplies, and we want to build on that into the future. So our strategic priorities, we have divided our priorities up into three main areas: quality, conservation, and future-proofing. And for each of these priorities, we've identified a set of objectives, and I'm going to take you through them now. So for quality, we've identified 7 objectives here to try and encourage group water schemes to promote best managerial practice from source right through to the consumer's tap. So we want to see consistent compliance with the drinking water regulations. We want group water schemes to fully adopt a water safety planning approach to achieve this. We want to see increased monitoring of water quality from source right through to the consumer's tap. And to help schemes do this, we want to see them implement the National Federation of Group Water Schemes Quality Assurance System effectively. We also want schemes to focus on source protection planning and in particular focus on the implementation of measures that's going to help them protect their source into the future. We want any treatment system deficiencies addressed throughout the lifetime of this plan. And we also want to see improved management of the distribution network across all schemes. So if we just take those individually, and I suppose the main reasons behind them, you've seen this graph a number of times, but I think it's key to our plan, and it's one of our key objectives to address particular water quality compliance. So you can see from the graph itself, the difference between the green line, the privately sourced group water schemes, and the blue line at the very top, which is the public water supplies. So there's clearly still a gap to be bridged there, and we want to address that. In recent years, we've seen this line become static, and actually last year, in 2018, I should say, we saw this line actually decline, which is a trend we certainly want to reverse very quickly. So how are we going to do that? Well, as you heard from Brian McDonald's presentation earlier today, key to this is going to be implementing a water safety planning approach to delivering water services from the source right through to the tap. And we believe our quality assurance system, based on the principles of HACCP, as outlined by Paul and Deane yesterday, if properly implemented, can help schemes achieve this. In terms of dealing with deficiencies of treatment plants and infrastructure, we were delighted last year when the department announced the new multi-annual Rural Water Programme 2019 to 2021 and published its framework, that they've continued to prioritise drinking water quality as measure 2, and the funding levels are there to help schemes address whatever deficiencies they might have. And I'm aware that many schemes are working very closely with the local authorities and our own staff to help identify what deficiencies are there and make the changes during this particular programme. In terms of water quality monitoring, we want to encourage and want to see schemes building up a profile of their water from source right through to the consumer's tap, and understanding the trends and what affects water quality, how it might deteriorate. So if we take simply from source, this image just demonstrates the challenge that that poses. These are a number of samples that were taken on the Stranooden Group Water Scheme as part of the source protection pilot project that's currently ongoing. But you can see from the various different sample bottles, even visually, how the source and the water contributing to their source varies greatly. So that poses huge challenges, but if we don't understand our source, we simply can't expect to be able to manage it or treat it efficiently or properly. So understanding what impacts on our source is really, really important and a major focus of this plan. And I think the River Basin Management Plan sets out, the 2018 to 2021 plan sets out the work that we wanted to achieve as part of that second cycle in terms of completing the delineation of all group water scheme catchments. But now we have these catchments substantially delineated. As outlined by Patrick yesterday, we want to now start focusing on developing integrated source protection plans for these areas. And to help us do that, last year we published our framework for drinking water quality source protection. And that framework really provides a roadmap for schemes as to how they go about developing this plan. So we will be helping schemes roll this out over the coming years. And we're initially going to be focusing our priorities on the priority areas in the River Basin Management Plan and where they cross over with group water scheme catchments. Other areas to address quality that's really important to us is continued professional development of the sector. And the photograph here just shows a number of group water scheme managers that came together last year and they're coming together quite regularly now to discuss issues, learn from each other, take part in training courses. And we want to see more of this and build on this. We have quite a large number of schemes that have appointed professional managers over recent years, and we want to see that further developed over the next few years. I understand this is very challenging, particularly for smaller schemes where they're still very much reliant on voluntary labour, and they're also may not have the scale to be able to take on someone to do this work. But we're convinced through a rationalisation and amalgamation project, their opportunities are there for schemes to work together, and certainly we will be helping schemes along that path. Just to mention in terms of training, the Local Authority Services National Training Group continues to have a range of operational training courses available to group water schemes on a regular basis, and we'd urge you to look at their website or talk to your development officer and we can help you organise whatever your training needs might be. There are other training providers out there as well, particularly ICOS SkillNet provides a significant number of courses that would help group water schemes from a business management perspective. And indeed our own training courses within the Federation we have a wide range of courses that are very apt for group water schemes to help them, particularly in these challenging times. We're delighted to say that we've, obviously with the current restrictions, training has been a challenge, but we're delighted to announce that we are now offering many of our training courses to group water schemes online, so they can participate in these courses from the comfort of their own home. Just moving on, our second strategic priority is water conservation. And for this priority, we have identified 3 objectives that we'd like to see achieved over the lifetime of this plan. And they are to complete our universal metering project, to better control water demand, and to improve the capacity of the group water scheme sector to manage that demand effectively throughout their distribution network. So I've just put up this image just as a reminder. This is a meter, consumer meter on the Tubberone-Listy-Broader group water scheme in a marker post. And it just reminds me of the number of schemes across the country that have had meters installed for quite a long period of time. We have some schemes that have had meters, have been universally metered since the early 90s. So they know the benefit that metering can bring to help schemes in terms of demand management. We did a survey in 2018, and we were surprised that there was still about 20% of privately sourced group water schemes were not universally metered. Now, many of these were small schemes, and we're also delighted that many of these small schemes on foot of that survey, we advised them to try and address this issue, and many schemes are doing that in the 2019 and 2020 multi-annual rural water programme or through their operational subsidy. In 2019, we also completed a survey on rural water investment needs, and we had over 170 group water schemes participate in that survey. But when we asked them the question as to whether you had prepared a water audit yet or not, only 85 group water schemes answered that they had. Now, for those schemes, the news was good in that the average unaccountable for water level appeared to be at around 21%, which is encouraging. Although what was disappointing was the fact that only 85 out of the 170 schemes had actually completed the audit. So we think that this overall average is likely to be much higher. And it's really impossible to measure this accurately without the proper infrastructure in place. And that's something that we want to focus on. Just to touch on the presentation you would have seen from Roisin yesterday, from a climate action perspective, the most significant measure any group water scheme can take is to conserve water and manage their demand effectively. As we know, one of the most significant costs for group water schemes is power, electricity. And the more you pump, the more it costs you to run and the more inefficient you're going to be. So what do schemes need to do? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that the necessary infrastructure is in place. And I'm delighted to see many schemes are implementing this now. They're dividing their networks up into district metered areas. They're installing bulk meters so they can monitor flow regularly. Many schemes now are also installing telemetry to be able to look at trends over time and help them manage their demand more effectively. But having the infrastructure in place is one thing. What we also need is we need to make sure that the group water schemes themselves have the capacity to be able to manage this properly. That's where our appropriate training and mentoring programs are going to be so essential for us. And we're going to have a major focus on this over the next couple of years. Our final strategic priority is future-proofing and to make sure that the sector is sustainable and resilient into the future. And we've identified 6 objectives under this priority to try and help us achieve that. We want to make sure that group water schemes are sufficiently resourced financially. We want to make particularly small schemes or where opportunities might exist. We want to see schemes rationalise further and implement amalgamation where that's feasible. We want to make sure the sector is prepared for the impacts of climate change. We want to build on that community awareness and pride associated with group water schemes. As I said earlier, group water schemes are community owned, community operated supplies with a massive sense of pride. And we want to make sure that that's not lost into the future. We need to make sure that group water schemes continue to provide professional management to their members and they meet their obligations with the cooperative ethos in mind. And we need to see a more planned approach to infrastructural renewal and investment. So for each of these, I'm just going to take you through some ideas. First of all, in terms of future-proofing the financial resources needed for a sustainable sector going forward, there's quite a bit of work happening in this space at present. Group water schemes, as you know, can currently avail of funding, operational funding through the subsidy, which was renegotiated back in 2017. And we're delighted that this appears to be very beneficial to group water schemes to help them meet their operational costs, particularly towards the domestic supplying of domestic water to meet that standard that's required. But schemes also have capital investment needs, and in particular, the department, to address that, the department established a working group back in 2018, made up of all these individual bodies and representative organisations, to come together and discuss and identify what are the rural water investment needs going forward. So the initial work programme for this group was to identify the needs of the sector for the current programme, and they established that reasonably quickly, and we were delighted to see significant increases in the level of capital funding available under the current programme. The group's work has now turned to phase 2, which is focusing on beyond 2021. So it's looking at the future investment needs, how the sector is going to be structured, and how that funding is going to be administered. So that work is currently ongoing and will be progressed over the coming period. And we're very much involved in that to make sure that the interests of the group water scheme sector are represented, but also that to ensure that the funding that's provided is going where it's needed most in a targeted way, and build on the new initiatives that, for example, in the current programme that exists in terms of water conservation, making sure group water schemes use their infrastructure they have in place to identify where they need the investment most, and that investment can then be provided through the programme. I mentioned already the potential for rationalisation and further rationalisation and amalgamation across the group water scheme sector. And this is just a copy of the document we submitted to the department back in 2016, highlighting what we feel was the potential for further work in this area. The 2 Pathfinder projects that were funded and footed this submission in Limerick and in Offaly were a resounding success, and we've learned an awful lot from them. And we're hoping to build on this strategy now over the period and lifetime of this particular plan. This is just an example of a photograph of how we've started that process. So we have a number of rationalisation and amalgamation clusters identified right across the country. And these are just 2 group water schemes in South Kilkenny that are participating in one of them. And these 2 schemes are located quite close to each other and have decided to physically amalgamate. Now this strategy is not without its challenges, and both these group water schemes would have had their concerns going into even considering this as an option for them. But through meetings like this and through regular engagement with each other, identifying what can be achieved, I think both schemes now realise that in order for them to be resilient into the future and be sustainable long term, the best way of doing that is for them to work together. So we're delighted this is one of the projects that will be hopefully progressed later this year. I mentioned earlier the difficulties that climate change poses for the sector, and Roisin again would have given you some very good information on this yesterday, but that was a major influencer of our plan as well. We've seen how changing temperatures and more frequent incidences of heavy rain and storm events can impact the group water on a group water scheme source, and we need to be ready to meet these particular challenges. So whether it be increased temperatures or whether it be the storm event, how do we prepare? But I'm delighted to see that many group water schemes are now really starting to analyse their sources in much more greater detail, monitoring trends in terms of levels of groundwater sources, but also comparing that to weather events. How is that impacting a weather event? Looking at raw water quality after prolonged heavy rainfall or after a prolonged dry period. We need to build up now the knowledge to be able to make us put infrastructural changes or whatever might be needed to build resilience into the sources for the future. Another area that's extremely important to us is our educational programme we deliver all about water to national schools. And we're delighted with the uptake on this over the last number of years, and we want to build on that going forward. So we've recently updated the course and how we deliver it, and obviously the challenges of COVID-19 bring, we're keeping this under review, and we're looking at possibly even online supports available to national schools to help them deliver the program itself. But it's been a resounding success, and it's so important to us because it's the children in this particular photograph. They are the next generation of group water scheme activists, and we want them to understand the importance of water and what we need to do to protect it. Engage them at an early age, make sure they bring the key messages back home into their own houses, farms and communities, and hopefully they'll get involved in their local group water scheme into the future. Just want to mention very briefly other areas we're working with. We're building on our partnership approach, which has been such a key part of I suppose our success as a sector to date, our willingness to work and learn from others. So we've recently established a new alliance with community-owned water supplies right across Europe. For a long time we thought we were unique, and there was no such thing as group water schemes anywhere but Ireland, and how wrong we were. We've now established links with community-owned water supplies across Austria, Italy, Spain, Denmark, Finland, to name a few. So we're going to continue to work and learn with these organizations and these schemes, and it's through working together, I think, we can certainly help each other and become stronger. Closer to home, we've seen in recent years the establishment of Forum Ishika, which the National Federation of Group Water Schemes is a proud member of, and we're delighted to be involved with it. And it provides a unique opportunity for all those different stakeholders and bodies that are interested in water and protecting water, an opportunity to hopefully influence policy into the future. So finally, just to conclude, our plan sets out what our strategic priorities are for the period up to 2024. And it's, as mentioned already, we've already started to roll out quite a number of initiatives in relation to the plan, and we're quite happy with the success so far. We're starting to see slowly as we're achieving our vision, our objectives which we set out. But we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're keeping it regularly under review, and we're confident that if the plan is implemented successfully, that we will achieve a sustainable and resilient future for the group water scheme sector across the country. So I leave it at that, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have in the Q&A. Thank you.